Welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, and it's nice to be here listening to Strauss. This is a podcast that has everything to do with Scientology. Yes, that interesting religion you might have heard about. If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. It's in iTunes and on Andy Nolch's YouTube channel, Andy Nolch being me. If you don't know what Scientology is, then I recommend listening to the first few episodes of this podcast because I answer some questions, and Scientology is quite a complex subject in religion, so you should probably listen to them, to be honest. Today's podcast is an interview with Ralph Hilton, the independent Scientologist auditor. Oh no, now it's time. We've got to go down that rabbit hole into the world of Scientology. Up is up, down is down. What? Left, right, up, then. Left is left, and right is right, and right is left, right. My God. Yes, welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. Today's podcast is going to be a bit longer than usual. I had quite a long talk with Ralph Hilton, who is a independent auditor. And he's quite an interesting person. Now, I just want to comment on last podcast, which was an interview with the Scientology skeptic Paul Colburn. And I thought it was a good chat that we had. Obviously, I had many disagreements with him on things, and he had many disagreements with me on things. But we're not going to come to any... we're just going to be bashing heads the whole time. Like, we're not going to come to any conclusions because he just has to, this is from my opinion, he just has to see some unusual things with his own eyes, actually see them, and then he'll start going, oh, maybe there's more to things than what he thinks. You know what I mean? You have to see these things, you know. I just think him and a lot of the skeptics haven't seen paranormal phenomena, pretty much. And so Scientology is going down the rabbit hole. It's got some unusual things. So of course he's going to dismiss it and say it's silly or whatever, and religion's silly and all that sort of stuff. But you know, one day he might actually come across something, like maybe he might see a UFO in the sky, a proper one, or he might have a psychic actually read his mind, and, you know, it wasn't just a guess. It just couldn't have been a guess. And he'll go, man, he'll stop and he'll think and he'll go, maybe there's more to life and what's going on, and maybe Scientology isn't just a load of crap, because that's what basically the skeptics think. They think it's not scientific and it's a load of crap. But the thing is, Scientology is scientific. You know, I wouldn't believe in it if I hadn't seen the evidence. You know, I can't believe in something without evidence. I'm actually a skeptic, but I'm not a skeptic like the way Paul Colburn is and these other skeptics are. They're like really skeptic. It's like they cannot believe anything unless they've got like a ton, so many tons of evidence, and they've seen it with their own eyes, and that people require different. Some people are gullible, some people are not gullible. The skeptics are so not gullible, it's funny. Like, it's ridiculous. That's how not gullible they are. They're just taking it too far, in my opinion. And for people who know a bit about Scientology, I can give more of a Scientology explanation. I believe they have a strong surfac right, in their case. They've got a strong surfac that says, I don't know what the specific surfac is, but maybe it's something like, avoid unusual things or avoid the paranormal or, you know, anything that's not explained in the mesh universe is not real. Something like that. I haven't quite worked out what the surfac they're running on is, but they seem to really need to do grade 4. They really need to get audited on it so that they're suddenly no longer going around in life with this surfac of just like saying instantly reject religion, instantly reject the paranormal, instantly reject psychics. They've got something going on there in their case that's like not allowing them to investigate it. I didn't have that in my case. I didn't believe in all this sort of unusual stuff years ago, right? But I wasn't going around like instantly rejecting and being real negative about it. And so I was able to look into it and then find some evidence and then have a conclusion. Whereas it seems like the skeptics are just running off a surfac, and because they've got the surfac, they they see a psychic or they see a Scientologist talk about past lives or something, and their instant reaction is just, like stimulus response is just, this is ridiculous, and walk off. That's their reaction. So they can't actually investigate it. They can't be scientific. Because to be scientific, you have to stop, look at all the evidence, investigate it, and come to a conclusion. And I truly believe that anyone who really is rational, who really can be scientific in their thinking, will actually conclude that there is something going on with UFOs, that there's something going on with Scientology in past lives, there's something going on with psychics and reading people's minds. So that's basically my opinion of the previous guest and skeptics in general. Another reason why I question skeptics is because when I observe them, they show a lot of anger. They tend to be very angry. Like Richard Dawkins, for example. You know, he's not just arguing that there's no God. He's doing it in like this angry way, and that to me is a warning sign that it's a case thing and that it's irrational because it's below tone too. You know. Anyway, there's some good news. I think you can sort of say it's good news. An Auckland Ideal Org has opened up in the church, and so that's cool. Hopefully, you'll get Scientology more popular in Auckland. I can always say negative things and that sort of stuff, but I haven't seen that the Ideal Org, weapon or the Ideal Org technique really works. So that's why I don't know if it's a very good thing. I mean, the building looks nice and it gets some people excited about Scientology again who've been offline for a while. But I don't know if it's a very successful action, basically. But I mean, I guess it's cool because the building looks nice, and I've heard that Auckland did recruit a lot of staff, which was really really great. When they 3 years ago only had like 30 people on staff or something, now they've got well over 100. So good on you, Aucklanders. All right, here's a win of the week. This is a success story, and it's on the Ned drug rundown. I am feeling tremendous relief from the need to take drugs or alcohol. As we are going through the rundown step by step, we are handling key moments in my life, 4 flows, where the taking of medication, alcohol, narcotics, you name it, held significant charge. Moments of great stress. These are just erasing away. So often we reach for that pill or drink to make us feel better, or we do the same to others hoping to make it better for ourselves or them, and it rarely works out better. It's often a real mess and very destructive. I am regaining control of myself again and ridding myself of compulsions, nervous twitches, anxieties, worries, etc. I feel calmer, saner, and more in present time each day. We're attacking the reactive mind, and in doing so, freeing me more and more each session. Thank you to my auditor, Chris, and to LRH, who clearly knows what he is doing. Cool. Yeah, I haven't done the Ned drug rundown, but I've done the Scientology drug rundown, and that was the funnest auditing I've had. Honestly, it was the funnest. Um, it took me like one intensive or a little bit more than that, and it was enjoyable, and I got this big win of that my muscles loosened off. They weren't as tense. So literally after doing the drug rundown, I went to touch my toes to stretch and touch my toes, and I could do it a lot easier because all the muscles in my back had loosened off their tension, right? Because when you're keyed in and stress, your muscles get all tense and hard and all this sort of stuff. So it'd been keyed out, and I could stretch and touch my toes, and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And on top of that, I definitely got rid of a lot of charge and negative emotions in me, and I had a lot of giggling on it towards the end of it. So it was a bit of fun. To me, it took in life. You got things happen, right? Anything can happen, and there's negative stuff that happen. Like let's say you go to school, there's negative stuff that happens, and there's positive stuff that happens. And sometimes you can get obsessed with the negative side of things. So you can think of school, and you can think of it being bad and blah blah blah. But there's still plenty of good moments, right? So on my drug rundown, I felt like the negative emotions and experiences that I had while I'd taken some drugs, they got handled in session and the charge got handled so that I was left feeling positive about all my drug experiences, basically. So when I looked back on the past and thought about it, I sort of like, it was like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that drug. That was fun and that was great. Like, I know it seems bad. Like it's almost like it's encouraging someone to take drugs. Like, I know. Honestly, it almost had that bad effect in that it just made me think of drugs in a positive way because it handled all the negative stuff. So I was just like, yeah, I tried that, and like, and instead of having negative thoughts come to mind about that drug, it was like positive thoughts would come to mind about that drug. But it didn't make me want to take more drugs or anything. But it did make me feel more positive towards drugs. Anyway, gosh, this is bad PR. Anyway, anyway, so hopefully people understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, all right. Here's a good quote by LRH. The number one trick of control used in this universe on a Thetan is to make the Thetan postulate that he himself can be damaged. Oh, that's from Control and Mechanics of SCS. Yeah, that's a nice one. That's very good. That's one thing that SPs and 1-1s and low-tone people will tell you is they'll say, "Oh, don't do this. Oh, don't do that. That'll hurt you. Oh, all scared." They try and they try and suck you into being scared. Oh, don't do. They try and encourage the idea that freedom is a dangerous, scary thing. You don't want freedom. No, oh, no, it's scary. No, oh, don't do that. That can damage you. And oh, this can harm you. And oh, don't speed. And oh, all this sort of stuff. They're trying to influence people into thinking that they can get harmed, when it's not necessarily true. You only get damaged if you think you can get damaged. Remember that, Anyway. All right, today's podcast is all about Ralph Hilton. He's the independent auditor, independent Scientologist. He lives over in Austria, in the mountains. And he's an interesting fella. He's been around Scientology for a long time. And we talk about a lot of things. And I think that's all I need to say. I think I like Ralph a lot because he's got this funny cheekiness about him. And he's a classic Scientologist in that he thinks for himself. Oh, well, he's a classic independent Scientologist in that he thinks for himself because the church members are a little bit different. So if I ask him a question about something, he won't give the groupthink answer. You know what I mean? He'll give his own answer that he's thought of. And even if I disagree with it or you disagree with his answers, they get you thinking and they're interesting and they're different. Just a classic Scientologist, because obviously he's had his mind open up and now he's thinking for himself and he's operating for himself. Whereas people who are, well, I don't mean to be mean to the average person, but and people who aren't Scientologists, there are plenty of people who aren't Scientologists who do think independently and think freely, but the average person tends to get caught up in groupthink and doesn't think uniquely and think for themselves. And that's one of the big things to do with the tech and going up the bridge is the more you become yourself and the more independent you become and the more unique and the more you give interesting answers. You don't just say the same thing, you know? All right, so let's go to this interview with Ralph Hilton. Today's guest interview is with Ralph Hilton. He is very well known in the independent field. He audits people for a living over in the mountains of Austria. He is an ex-Sea Org, and he used to be on the ship in the 70s. And he's done the OT levels. Welcome to the podcast, Ralph. Are you there?
I'm here. Thanks,
Yeah.
Andy.
Good to hear from you. What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm auditing, mostly on Skype at the moment. I've been developing some e-meters. I'm making them for people here.
Wow.
I play with quadcopters a bit.
That's cool. You're making your own e-meter, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, you can see them here. This is one I made that I use for solo.
Oh wow! Look at that. Look how big is that? Is that usually the dial usually that big? The range? It looks really long.
No, this is this one's 50% bigger than the normal ones, and it's an experimental one. I just use it for solo because the needle movement is quite different, so it takes a while to get used to. Normally, I make them for people with the standard size. Sort of 7-centimeter needle.
So would you recommend that people have two e-meters, one sort of for the other stuff and one for the solo?
No, I would just use the same one actually. I like this one because of the wide dial, but it does take a little bit of learning to get used to if one's used to a normal one. So I don't generally sell them.
Does it have pretty much the same features as a Mark 7?
No, it's well, I can make them similar, but I prefer the automatic meters where the person doesn't have to touch the TA knob. It just brings the needle to set by itself.
Wow. So is it a lot easier to audit with these automatic TAs?
Yeah, it's basically no touch. Once you've got the sensitivity set, then you don't need to do anything. Maybe touch the reset button occasionally to bring the needle back on the dial, but otherwise it's all automatic.
Wow, and it's actually accurate, so it's not like you can actually trust that this automatic TA works and everything.
Oh yeah, it's got a little computer in there that does all the calculations.
Wow. Do you reckon LIH would be loving that?
I don't know. He wanted to keep it the same as it was in 1966 or 65 when he made the Mark V. He said, just keep it this way. Yeah. Because he was worried about electronics guys changing things too much and getting too sophisticated.
Yeah.
So he liked his old Mark V, and he wouldn't have had nothing to do with the Quantum or the new Mark VIII or anything else. He would have just kept his old Mark V.
Wow. David Miscavige would disagree with you on that one. Apparently, LIH ordered to make the special Quantum Mark VIII.
Somehow I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be saying David Miscavige would be lying, would you?
Well, let's say creative in his. I think it's basically not true. I don't think. Well, the Mark VII even didn't come out until after LOH was gone off the lines. And if LOH had really wanted a Mark VIII, it wouldn't have taken that many years for it to come out.
Yeah.
He would have just got it done within 6 months or so.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does the church think of you? Like, are you a big SP?
Oh, I'm on the official enemies list
Oh,
from 30 years ago. Yeah,
oh yeah.
was declared a suppressive person, shoot on sight, R245, and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, hopefully I don't get into too much trouble, huh? Talking to you.
Oh, well, they'll blacklist you. They'll put up a website saying what a nasty person you are, and but actually, I've had very little harassment from them here. It's
Is it dying away, or did you actually used to get a lot of attacks in the past, or?
um, it's they've sent a couple of people around. Oh, there was one girl that came and she pretended to be interested and she was asking questions. And then a few weeks later, I got a call from the tax people, and they said, "Oh, you've been not listing this on with tax returns or whatever." And um, then I saw the paper they had in front of her, in front of the uh, tax guy, and I could see it was a handwriting and that. But there were things that she said in the letter that made it obvious it was someone from the church.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the language, like using words like reality and communication or something like that, or.
Well, no, it was a particular thing they did, but it's something I don't want to say in case they do it again.
Oh yeah.
But basically, after I talked to the tax man and told him about the difficulties, he says, "Well, you better be careful. Someone doesn't like you." But they were quite friendly about it.
Yeah, they were just doing their job.
Letters like that. But there was that one episode, and then I mean they've put things up on the internet. They
Hate websites or something.
no, well, one, but that's fairly minor. They wrote a program that all the church computer users had to install on their computers. And one of the things that it did was it blocked my name from appearing on their computer.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was just before Windows 98 came out,
Yeah.
and it was installed on Windows 95. So there was a huge list of names of people and websites and everything that would get blocked from their computers. And within a few weeks of them completing this program of getting it installed on all the Scientologists' computers, then Windows 98 came out and it wiped it all out.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
their efforts were overwritten.
Yeah.
It was a very covert operation because someone got a copy of their installation disk, which didn't actually say that they were installing this thing. And I installed it under a program that makes any installation reversible.
Wow.
So I installed it on the computer, looked at what it did. This installation monitor made a list of all the files it had modified, put backups of all the old ones, and it had actually made a new version of the main interface between the computer and the internet and put a little block into it.
So,
But then,
so did it have some sort of effect built in it so that it was hard to delete?
no, it was easy to delete once you knew the name of it, but
Oh, okay.
people wouldn't even know that it was installed if they hadn't been warned.
Yeah, because when I found out about that, this was when I was finding out about the how the church wasn't what I thought it was, and I found that really shocking when I found that out because they they gave everyone CDs to install, so that people could make their own Scientology website and talk about how good Scientology is, and then they added an extra thing into that CD that people didn't know about, this net nanny program. And when I found out about that, I was like, wow, that's so shifty. You know what I mean? I was like, I was really surprised because a friend mentioned who was around in that time mentioned how he got the CD and put it in his computer, and then I was like, whoa, he didn't even know that he was getting the net nanny at the same time. It's amazing.
But I posted deletion instructions on the internet and how to revert it. So it was,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm sure you're happy with me for that.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah, so no wonder why you're not a fan of them. So it's not just that you audit people which they wouldn't like. It's also that you put information out there that reaches people.
Yeah, I mean they probably don't like me for posting something into Wikipedia saying that actually the trademarks of Scientology are not valid because the word was in use um, before LOH used it, and he actually said so on a tape. So I posted the tape where LOH said, "Oh, he found the name in a library."
Yeah,
And
they wouldn't like you. Yeah. So were you part of helping write some of the Wikipedia pages for Scientology?
no, I didn't get into that. I just made a few amendments briefly, but I don't get into Wikipedia now.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, because I found looking into Scientology Wikipedia stuff, it's not too bad. Like I kind of was like, oh, it's not too inaccurate. I was kind of impressed with it, to be honest.
I think the church have been forbidden from making alterations to it. All their domain names were blocked, and
Yeah.
so
So what do you see is the future of the church? Just out of curiosity.
it's been gradually disintegrating since um,
The 70s, since all 80s.
well, since the mid '80s, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
And we had after the Dianetic Clear um, issues came out, and lots of people were testing to clear. There were lots
What
of
was that?
clear,
Sorry, what was that?
well, before 1978, in order to reach clear, a person had to do a lot more auditing. They had to go through the grades, through Dianetics, power processing. They had to do the solo course. They had to do R60W, and they had to do the clearing course until they had a particular cognition.
Mm,
But in 1978, LOH said that a lot of people had actually reached the state of clear on Dianetics or on certain other procedures.
mm.
So suddenly the number of clears jumped from maybe 5,000 or 6,000 up by about 20,000. And over the years, it got up to about 50,000. But a lot of those were people attesting and then de-attesting and then getting the CCRD. And then there was an earlier version of it. And so some people would attest 3 or 4 times. So we don't even know if that 50,000 figure is valid.
So that brings up a really good point. So are you saying with your auditing, you use materials that are all prior to 1978?
No, there are issues that came out after 78 that I would say are valid. Just from my understanding of the tech and how LOH wrote, I would say that the false purpose rundown seems good, the happiness rundown.
The OT level
Basically,
stuff?
the OT, the net for OTs, yes. It looks like up to the point that he died, he was to some extent on the tech lines. So I don't think there's much that was really bad before then, except for, I don't recall the date when all this weird sec checking of people came out on solar knots, but that doesn't seem like LOH.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
but
so is it kind of like you do follow standard LRH tech, but some things you don't, like this 1978? Is it a particular issue you're talking about, a policy that was released?
oh, there was well, I think this has been talked about on the net quite a lot, and it's something I'd left the church before it happened. But people had to go for 6-month checkups on solo knots. They
Hmm.
had to pay to go to flag, and then pay for extensive sec checks to make sure they were behaving ethically and not saying anything bad about David Miscavige or whatever.
Yeah.
And these seem to be a case interruption,
Yeah.
and the person on a successful action, they were having gains, and even if they were doing fine, then they would still have to pay their money every 6 months, which was a good cash cow for miscarriage.
Yeah. Yeah, but this thing that happened in 1978, because I noticed it as well with the bulletin that was released or whatever. I noticed that a lot of people were getting passed off as natural clears and stuff like that, and it sounds like it was better before that, when it was like, a person had really thoroughly become clear, and after that it was suddenly like all these people could just get away with quicking, just shooting up the bridge. You know what I mean? And not really achieving each level properly.
I think that happened to quite a lot, yes. And in the church, they did introduce changes over the years, and um, but generally, I would say that a lot of the people who were tested clear were in fact clear, because many of them had been in Scientology a long time and had a fair bit of auditing. Um, so it would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, rather than. I think the state of clear was easier to attain than had been thought.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And just because a person was clear, it didn't necessarily mean that their grades were handled. So a
Yeah.
person might go clear and then handle their grades and then get on to OT levels. And it would vary depending on the sequence, depending on what auditing they'd had and their general case state.
I remember when I was involved with the church, and I was speaking to a guy 2 years ago, and he he went clear as one of these people. I don't know if it was a natural clear, but he went clear without doing the grades. And I'd recently done the grades, and I remember it would come up, and he'd mention something like, "Oh, I haven't done the grades." And I remember thinking in my head, because I thought it was a little bit aberrated, and also I feel like the grades are good, and everyone should do them. And I kind of remember just thinking, I reckon this guy should be doing the grades. And he said something like, I'm clear, so I don't have to do the grades. Like, I've already had that charge handled or something. And something in me was just like, that's not right. I think he should be doing the grades. Like, I don't think he's had that charge handled. Like, I know he's gone clear, but you know, he was making out the fact that he'd gone clear means that there's no point in him doing the grades.
No, that isn't. I would say that isn't true. And most people in the independent field and in the church do want people doing the grades. There was a period around from 78, maybe for 10 years, when a lot of people were not doing the grades and they were going on to OT levels and often doing them very quickly. So that people would do the whole bridge in less than a year. And they'd finish OT2, OT3 very quickly. They'd get on to the upper levels. They'd be OT8 in a year. And basically they hadn't finished anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it was noticed by a lot of people in and out of the church that the grades do need to be brought to an EP. But it's also true that if a person reaches the state of clear, they can re-stimulate the OT levels. And that depending on how a particular person's case goes, it may be better to look at a few things that they re-stimulated after clear before getting on to the grades.
Yeah. That would explain why a lot of people these days in the church are, having to redo things and probably go back and do their grades and get everything properly done. I think it's good, the position we're in these days, because it's a bit more standard, as in we've got all this information of history, and your generation were more the guinea pigs, I guess. And so what do you think of that? Do you think the younger generation now have it luckier in that they can really, do things in the proper order and stuff?
It depends where you go. I think if they go to the church, they're probably going to spend a vast fortune doing things that aren't necessary. And I don't think the church have learned very much in the last 30 years. And so I'd say, yes, we were somewhat guinea pigs, but that the tech in the church really hasn't progressed much in the last 30 years.
What do you think of GAT2?
I think it's rubbish. I think that the LOH originally wanted the training very simple. He wanted it straightforward. People sit down, they do their e-meter drills, and they can become auditors within a few weeks. This extensive gap training is getting people spending hundreds and hundreds of hours on very robotic drills that don't really teach a person to audit, but they teach them things like, well, if the pre-clear says this, what do you say? And they have long sheets of, if the pre-clear says, I want to pick my nose, what do you say? Oh, you tell him to go ahead.
So it's making a robot auditor, like an auditor out of a robot, yeah.
Yeah. And then these people get confused when they're in a session and the pre-clear says there's a giraffe outside the window, and the auditor looks at his sheet and there's nothing about giraffes, so he doesn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's actual cases have come up of that.
Yeah, so it makes the auditors just crappy auditors.
Very robotic, and they don't understand the tech and how to apply it. They just understand how to say the words that they've been robotically taught to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look around in most of the ideologues and that, I mean, there's barely anyone training to be an auditor. And there's barely anyone buying e-meters, and there's just occasionally you hear someone going clear and that, and it's these are some of the reasons why, because it's just like the whole church has made the whole bridge a big stop, a big long slow stop. Yeah.
And there's so many crimes an auditor can commit that basically anyone's scared silly of wanting to become an auditor.
Yeah.
If you miss you get a comma. If you go past a misunderstood, if you miss out a comma in the right place in your worksheets, you didn't put the date and the PC's name on every page of the worksheets, and there's a whole list of things that have to be perfect, and you have to get videoed, and very robotic videos. Well, yeah, they're just not making auditors.
Yeah, and it's just like, obviously it's good to promote standard tech, but they've used this thing of like keeping the tech standard as a justification for just making just all these stops and all these regulations that are just ridiculous. And nowadays in the church, it's like you can't even just buy an e-meter. It's like you have to fill out a contract, and you have to get a license renewal on that e-meter. And it's just like, it's just all these stops, and it's just, that's why, the independent movement is where it's at and why it's growing, because people can just, go and buy a secondhand meter, and people are just free to be themselves,
I mean, there's the other side of it, which is that there's a lot of what one would term squirreling in the independent field, people doing things that just aren't anywhere near Scientology and trying to pass it off as Scientology. So people have to be, I mean, you have things like auditors who think that the auditor can hold the cans.
Okay.
He's auditing somebody over the telephone, and he's holding the cans, and he thinks the reads that he gets over the telephone are valid for the pre-clear's case. And you get people being trained to audit their food.
Really?
That's serious.
Wow.
If one goes along to one of Bill Robertson's groups, when they get to around OT12, OT13, they're taught to train entities to audit their food, to make sure they don't get any theta coming in.
Interesting. But it's kind of... So it's just like in the independent field, it's like it's just a bit more like the Wild Wild West, isn't it? Where you just have to be a bit more cautious, but at least you're not guaranteed shit auditing. Where it seems like in the church, you're sort of guaranteed to get shit auditing, aren't you?
Maybe some places it's okay. It's very expensive and probably quite laborious. I haven't talked to people who've had any decent auditing recently in the church. I think it's been a long time.
Yeah. I did the GAT2 auditing, and it seems like they've quickied the grades. They've made them a lot quicker, and it seemed like GAT1 people were bogging down a lot more. So to solve that, they just quickied the grades.
I don't really have data on it. Um, I don't know what people were doing in the grades on GAT 1. I wasn't around then.
Yeah.
And so I would say the grades were probably laborious under GAT 1, and it's possible they've actually brought it down to a more realistic time.
It's
But
yeah. It seems like from what I've looked into it, they've brought it down a lot faster. Anyway, but I was going to ask something. So what do you think is the future for the church? Because I'm just sort of interested in that. I think some people think that it's designed to slowly get shut down. But I kind of feel like it's going to last, but just last small for a really, really long amount of time.
yeah, that's the feeling I have. It will just. And David Miscavige is quite a forceful personality, and he's not someone who's just going to roll over and let it die in its existing form. I think he'll keep it going as long as he's alive.
Yeah, it seems pretty dedicated.
But then there's the problem of succession in that he's thrown out a lot of the decent people, and I don't know that he actually has anyone left in the organization competent enough to carry on. But I would expect once he goes that the church would mellow out somewhat. And but it would also, without his ruthless driving force, it will probably get smaller and smaller. So it'll be something like the Theosophical Society, and it'll just become a small group that, well, maybe still has a few properties left, but it needs a total, it needs a new start with someone like LRH back running the show, who knows how to build something like that up.
Yeah, like get them out of the hole they're stuck in.
Yeah.
I have you watched some of the Skype? The video footage of the drone that's flying over some of those bases in California. I don't know if you've seen it. Yeah, the thing I noticed about some of those footages of the different locations was how quiet they were. How didn't seem like there's a lot of action going on at these gold bases and all that sort of stuff.
I think as soon as a drone comes near, there's a security guard on the phone or the walkie-talkie saying, "Okay, they're coming. Hide, hide."
Yeah, do you really think that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, because I didn't think that. I just thought that I just thought, wow, these gold bases are really empty. Things are really quiet. Like things aren't happening.
They probably are quiet. I mean, people are inside.
Yeah.
There's not much they can do outside. They're going to be sitting at their desks in their offices, doing whatever they're doing. So you're not going to see, if you go around to Clearwater, you don't see much activity, except for lunchtime, dinner time, when people are transported between the buildings. So you wouldn't see much on the drones because it's just not happening outside.
What do you think about the Sea Org at the moment? Do you think that they've got less staff than ever, or more than ever? What do you think?
I don't really know. From what little I know of what's going on in the States, I think they're recruiting a lot of people from poorer countries who are happy with Sea Org wages and conditions.
Yeah.
I don't think they're recruiting many Americans or British or Australian people. They're basically, they find someone who's not very well educated, who's used to earning 20 cents an hour, and they put them through a minister's course and say they're vitally needed on posts in America, and they get them a visa, a green card.
When I was involved with the church, because when you don't know anything about the history at all, you're so susceptible to all this info that comes out of the church. So when I was involved with it, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, how much Sea Org staff there was, I'd probably say, yeah, it's probably the most ever. Like I'll be like, yeah, it's probably it's probably the highest it's ever been. But now it's like, oh, it could be the smallest it's ever been. But it's just interesting how easily how brainwashing works. It like you exclude certain information, then other information you give them a lot of that, and eventually you create a person that thinks the way you want them to think.
I'd say the Sea Org is between 2 and 5,000 internationally. That would be my guess.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'd say the total number of Scientologists on the planet who are actively involved with the church doing something is in the region of 20,000.
yeah, yeah.
There's no 8 million. No, that.
There's no what?
There's no 8 million.
Oh yeah. That's definitely not. Yeah, yeah. I can definitely say with Sea Org, it's probably about 300 or 500 in Australia, 250 maybe. Yeah.
Hmm.
So just thinking, why should someone do Scientology? Someone who's listening to this.
You mean who doesn't know anything about it?
Yeah, yeah,
I suppose they need to learn something about it first before it's a bit of a broad question to answer in a few sentences. But if someone wants to learn more about themselves, to find something about their spiritual nature, to explore the possibilities of learning about reincarnation, about their past lifetimes, regaining some of the experiences and knowledge they had, getting rid of a lot of their personal difficulties and inhibitions, learning to become more capable in areas of life, then it's something they can look into.
With the past life thing, let's say someone was a photographer in their past life. Do you think with auditing and them remembering some of this past life stuff, do you think that they could actually suddenly start becoming a really good photographer without even having done much training?
If someone had had a lot of training in a past lifetime, I think they could regain a lot of that ability very quickly without doing all the training again. I mean, if you look at someone like Angelina Jordan, are you familiar with her, the
No.
singer?
No.
I mean, this girl is 10 years old and she's singing as if she's been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
Note perfect, has charisma, she's a perfect singer. And she started, I think, at the age of 7 or 8. And to me, that she looks like someone who's learned to do that in a past lifetime. I don't think anyone could become that good in 2 or 3 years without prior experience.
Yeah.
There have been other, I don't recall a name straight off, but other instances of very young children showing a huge ability in some field without this lifetime training.
Yeah.
And to me, it seemed I can't see any other option, but they've done it before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really funny because people just who don't know about this sort of stuff just pass it off as, a coincidence or a sort of odd sort of thing. But there's sort of answers for why these people are like this. Like I've noticed that my mum gets sparked up by photography, gets sort of excited about it and sort of gets into it and suddenly like becomes more, you know what I mean? Her hat suddenly changes around a camera, yet she's had no formal training in photography. And it's the sort of thing where you think, I bet you she was a photographer in her past life, because all of a sudden she's like, setting up the camera and getting people into positions and suddenly becoming this beingness. And it's quite funny to watch. And so have you noticed that with people like actually in your environment?
Well, I mean myself, I was it seems like electronics. I had no formal training in electronics. I played around with a few things, built a couple of radios when I was in my teens, and then I ended up on the ship, and suddenly the electronics guy went mad and they didn't have anyone to replace him. And so I just started picking up the manuals and going through them, and I was fixing the radars and the radios and everything else when I was just 19 years old. And I don't think there were many people who could do that. It was just an area that was very open to me and easy.
Yeah.
Well, something like learning German is totally abysmal for me. It's
Oh yeah. Gee.
I just can't do it. But I can learn a computer language very quickly.
Yeah.
So there are areas I feel I have whole track experience in, and areas where I have to start from scratch.
Just out of curiosity, do you know who you were in your past life and the lifetime before that, like, pretty accurately?
There are things that there are times when I've had certainty on it and times uncertainty. And at the moment, for me, the situation with reincarnation doesn't seem as simple as presented. In other words, as an example, a lot of people say they were Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
A lot of people say they were Henry VIII. A lot of people say they were Cleopatra. But not very many people say they were peasants who didn't have enough bread and they were beaten every day as slaves.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously that most of the people were poor people who weren't actually doing very much. Then there's another factor, is that most people cannot have had past incarnations on this planet. Just because of the number of people who currently have bodies. If you add up how long people live and that sort of thing, well, most people couldn't have had a past lifetime.
Yeah.
Because there weren't that many people around in the past.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's unknown, a lot to be sorted out as far as how this whole reincarnation thing works. Because it isn't as simple as all the billions of people on the planet now weren't around 200 years ago. There weren't enough bodies.
This is really, really interesting because this brings on to the whole past life and natural clear thing, because it's like, it's like the amount of people who were from like 85 to the year 2000 or something in the church that were passed off as being past life clear. It's as if suddenly all the people in the 50s who were doing Dianetics just dropped dead. And suddenly reincarnated, and then they were all getting born in the 60s and 70s and coming around in the 90s and saying, oh, I was actually clear in my past life. And it seems quite strange because it's like the statistics don't match up. It's just like it's quite odd. And also it's like this thing where everyone wants to be Jesus or Cleopatra, and everyone wants to be, a past life clear, and they don't want to be, someone who just did grade 1 or something, So it's like, what do you think of this whole natural clear thing and all that? And do you think you've gone clear, obviously, so then next lifetime and stuff, do you think you have to do your grades again and all that?
No, definitely not. If a person finishes grades this lifetime, then they're good with that.
And so so they'll be found out with those tech with the tech thingos and stuff, and the list, you can find out if someone's past life, because it just seems that it's an untrustworthy way of working out if that person did go clear past life, because all these people are getting passed off as being clear when they don't seem to be.
Well, eventually they're going to fall by the wayside and have to get picked up again. So if somebody's gone very quickly to clear and didn't make it or falsely attested, then somewhere along the line they're going to have problems and they're not going to be able to audit the upper levels. And then at that point one would have to say, okay, well, let's check over from the beginning. Let's see, did you reach this grade? Did you reach that grade? And go through it all and pick them up at the point where that they've actually reached.
Yeah.
And it's standard tech per CS Series 2.
Yeah.
Like I said, when a person has problems, that you find out what grade they actually attained on the bridge, and then get them moving from that point.
Yeah. Yeah. But and so yeah. So with a lot of these people who were attesting to past life clear or natural clear in the 90s and stuff, you just think that you would just be reordering them, a lot of them, to redo things, sort of.
I wouldn't make any generalization about it.
Yeah.
I would say it has to be looked at on a case by case basis, and I would expect, in a way, that a lot of the people who dropped off the lines for whatever reasons, died or whatever, past life stuff, they would be drawn to Scientology again in this lifetime. So that although the number might seem quite large who are attesting to natural clear or past life clear, I think they would feel attracted towards Scientology, recognize it. So the number would be far higher than would occur in the natural population.
Yeah.
And another thing which I disagree with LRH about, and might seem rather weird, is that I think a lot more things have happened like Scientology in the past than he thought.
Okay.
And that way back a long time, we did have parts of the technology, and a lot of people did reach clear.
Okay.
In millions of years ago.
Yeah.
I've just come up with recalls on my own about it, and other people have come up with it, and I think there are certain points on the track when parts of Scientology, not the whole thing, were being used and people were making case gain.
Good. Sounds good.
So a lot of this could be surfacing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting issue. So I was just wondering, what's some wins that you've gotten from Scientology?
Myself, I think the biggest win was when the whole track disappeared.
Wow.
I was auditing expanded Dianetics back in '78, and I ran through a particular long process. It was about an hour, and suddenly this huge sort of black mass around 100 meters going forward, looking like a sort of spaceship from nowhere, just went poof. And I didn't have any pictures. I didn't have any whole track. It was all gone. And that was probably the biggest shift I had. At one point, just in one session. Since then, I think the biggest gains I've had from Scientology have been on knots. And it's like going on each day, auditing each day, and more opens up. I noticed.
Oh yeah, can I ask you about the knots thing, because and it's probably mainly the church has given it such a bad name, the OT levels, but yeah, it seems like a really questionable area. You hear about some people getting unwell, and some people going a little bit crazy. A little bit like the hearing voices and stuff. And there's something really interesting about hearing voices, because all these people who are in psych wards and that talk about hearing voices and all this sort of stuff. There's something going on there. But so you reckon that you do trust the OT levels, and they are good, and when you do them right, they are awesome, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, but I think they're done very strangely a lot of the time.
Like what do they do in the like, without getting into too much confidentiality? What are they doing in the church? Are they just squirreling and the members of PTS, so it's just not working as well.
Well, so first, the way the pricing is structured, when a person pays for OT2, OT3, the church doesn't get any more money until the person finishes that level. And then they will get money for their OT4, their auditing. They tend to push people through very quickly on OT2 and 3.
Yeah.
Which means that later they will need more review auditing and they will have to pay for that. So I think the major thing in the church is that OT2 and OT3 are run far too quickly and the person isn't properly in a good enough case state to make it through to OT8.
I think it seems like nearly everything in the church is being quickied. Even like when it comes to just reading the Dianetics book and stuff like that, I noticed that it's just got this philosophy of, you know, the high stats thing and do everything in a hurry, and it ruins the whole point of Scientology. You know, like I remember a soup came up to me and I was studying, I think, history of man or something like that, and, you know, I was, you know, going along studying carefully, trying to understand it and getting a lot from it, and she was, like, standing there, like, bragging about how fast she studied it, and it's just like, you know, I don't care, it's not good to study something fast, you're not getting any data from it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there is a huge difference in the rate at which people can study something and apply it. It's like 100 to 1, maybe more.
Oh, wow.
I observed it at Flag. I mean, we had people on course who could read half a page in 2 hours.
Yeah.
In the Sea Org. And we had people who could read 100 pages in the same time and understand it and apply it.
Okay. Yeah.
So there is a huge difference, and but I think the church do tend to quickie things. They quickie the things which get the stats up if they're quickied.
Yeah.
The things they don't quickie are SAC checks, because a person has to keep on paying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say that there's certain things that they don't quickie, and there's certain things that they absolutely quickie. And I remember I was doing objective auditing, and my twin was coming close to completing the whole course, and there was pressure because I was on staff at the same time. There was pressure from executives and staff to get him completed, and I was the auditor, right? And so I sort of was looking at his case and stuff, and, you know, writing things to the CS, and I was seeing this phenomenon of, like, the CS and me kind of getting pressured to finish this guy faster than what he really needed, and it really pissed me off at one point. I was just like, what the hell is going on? This is just not right. You know, it's someone's case. It stats and, you know, you execs, it's nothing to do with this. You know, things take as long as they take. And it's kind of made me concerned in that, like, if the auditor and the CS aren't smart, they can just get, and if they're not that ethical as well, they can just get pressured into quicking people on things to get the stats up.
Oh. I noticed, even when I was at Flag, it's been worse than that, worse since. I would look at the staff auditing completions, and every week in the international training org there might be 50 to 100 completions listed, and that would be their stat, number of case completions. And then I would look at them, there might be 1 grade 0, 1 OT2, and 98 SEC checks. Even back then.
What year was that?
That was back around 1980.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I understand, though. It seems like that they were more turbulent times. There was more attacks going on. Whereas nowadays the church is just quiet and just not many people have anything. No one's having anything to do with them. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah.
I would say the church is getting more attacks now than it's ever had.
Oh, really?
I mean, we weren't really getting a lot of attacks back then. There's a lot of talk about it, but I think the church was actually expanding more.
Oh yeah, it's
before
expanding more.
1982, and I would go along to course rooms. I remember in '78 I went um, on a tour around the United States, and I was recruiting people for the Sea Org. And I would walk into some course rooms in a mission and see 200 people on course.
In a mission?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
200 people in the dynamics course room, 200 people in basic courses.
No way. So how many people in the whole mission would you say?
Oh, there could have been 400 or 500 public in some of those missions.
It's kind of like a Scientology school, like it was actually happening, whereas now it's like just a few people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean the missions, the destruction of the missions was the end of Scientology, basically. The
yeah,
end of Scientology expansion.
yeah,
It was like cooking the golden goose.
yeah,
They raised the golden egg because the missions were sending so many people to Flag. They were sending their staff to training for Flag. The mission holders, their staff were getting auditing at Flag. The whole of Flag expansion was funded by the missions.
yeah,
And there are people, there were quite a few missions out there, and mainly on the West Coast or um, a few other locations in the US, and they would continually have hundreds of students on course. They had more people at one of those missions than Flag had sometimes.
Wow. Yeah,
But then the greedy Sea Org financial thieves went in there. They demanded all the money that the missions had as fines for crimes which never happened. And basically they busted all the missions, destroyed them. They made a few million out of doing it, but they destroyed Scientology.
yeah, yeah. And just for people who are listening who don't know much about the indie Scientologists, we basically believe that since LRH went off lines in the '80s, the church has just been on a decline, and it's gotten worse, and it's changed, and it's actually not standard tech. And yeah, I mean, this is what I'm talking about, because if someone gets into Scientology in 2002 or something, they don't realize that that in '78 there actually was a lot of people doing Scientology, and there was a lot of activity going on. Like, people don't know about the history of the church, so nowadays they can easily get sucked into what's going on and just have no idea what it used to be. And these were some of the things that made me realize, the changes that had been made and what was going on. I remember when I first found out, that there was actually a lot of people doing Scientology in the '70s, and I was just like, what? It was just like, what? There was that many, like, stuff was actually going on, like
Now, there was a lot more going on in the late '70s than there is now.
Yeah, it was just like, oh wow, it was like, wow, and it's just kind of like a shock, because when you find that out, you suddenly start going, well, what's happened? Why has things changed? And then you start investigating things. So it's like, at the moment, the people in the church and that, they're not going to be walking around parading, hey, things were a lot better before David Miscavige came along. They're not going to be announcing that, and David Miscavige isn't going to be announcing that either.
Yeah. In order to get Scientology moving again, it needs a strong leader, and it needs a lot of the kind of people like Alan Walter, for example, who are building up the Scientology field. It needs missions that aren't being controlled by flag management with a huge bureaucracy, and they're taking all the money out that they can. It needs some strong leaders.
Yeah, and it's just like the stops on the lines are it's just epic. Like, if you want to train to be an auditor and you buy your materials for level 1 to level 4 or something, there's nothing confidential in those, is there? It's just the standard stuff. Yet if you want to buy them, they'll give you just your level 1 when the routing form says you're up to that level. and you have to go to the bookstore, and then they'll, 3 months later when you finish your training on a level 1, then they'll give you the level 2, and they won't just hand you the e-meter, they won't just hand you all the materials that you purchased, which is just common sense and what they should do. They just have all these little things that are like, oh, it's supposed to be this way, and the whole justification is it's helping Scientology, making it more standard, but all the meanwhile it's not, it's just slowing down the expansion of Scientology.
Yeah, it's control mechanisms. And you used to be able to buy an e-meter, and you said, oh, well, I'm training as an auditor, I need a meter, and you walk into the bookshop, give me money, and you got it.
Yeah.
That was about it.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now you probably have to apply, or we have to send in a thingo to make sure you qualify for buying an e-meter, and make sure you qualify for doing this and that. And it's like, when they released new e-meters back in the 70s and stuff, did suddenly everyone were they all forced to use the new e-meter?
No, it's difficult to remember. I remember people were using the Mark V after the 6 came out. I personally felt that the Mark 6 was not better than the Mark V. I thought the reads were more sluggish, but it wasn't something I could dare say.
But was everyone forced to? Because the way it is now, I'm pretty sure, like with this new e-meter that they've released, it's like, no, you have to all use this new e-meter, and your old e-meter's worthless.
The Mark V was okay up to a certain level. I think once you got onto solar notch, you had to use the Mark 6 or 7, or when that came out. But I mean, we're talking about the period just before when I left, the Mark 6, and the 7 was after I left. So I didn't really have a lot of data on what's happened over the last 30, 35 years.
Yeah, it just seems like something with Miscavige. It seems like more of a Miscavige sort of thing where it's like, I'm releasing a new e-meter and everyone's being forced to buy it. It seems like back when Hubbard was around, he would release new e-meters so people just would buy it, and you're not forced to buy this new e-meter,
Well, it didn't really happen. Once the Mark V was developed, then he didn't change things. He just wanted the Mark V used until I don't know how much he was involved with the Mark 6. Somehow it seemed strange to me that he would approve the Mark 6, because to me it was an inferior meter to the Mark V.
Yeah.
So I don't know if somebody else okayed it or what happened, but he wasn't in favor of changing e-meters.
Yeah.
At the time I knew.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's a bit of a distraction, to make this new fancy colors and, like I heard they were releasing some sort of e-meter that was like to raise money as well. So it was so expensive because it was also a donation. But they were releasing these gold-plated e-meters that were like $100,000. Did you hear about that?
I haven't heard that one now, but
yeah, and I made sure I asked.
It's cash cows.
Yeah, exactly.
You get one of each color, $5,000 each.
It was crazy, man. And the person who told me that, I made sure I asked him a few times. I was like, "Are you serious? They were selling this for $100,000?" He was like, "Yeah." He was like, it was a silver gold-plated e-meter, and he used
to do it with LOH autograph books.
Yeah.
They would go for a fortune, and people actually thought that LOH autographed them. But I know the lady who did it. They didn't even get an LOH autograph book for their money.
So you telling me that the church was actually selling books claiming that they were signed by LOH and they weren't?
Yeah.
Serious? Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because if they're selling these fancy gold-plated e-meters that are $100,000, which is just so, like, even if you factor in, you want to help your church out by donating a few thousand, like, just it's so excessive. And then at the end, the person who buys that e-meter just ends up being a poor old person. You know what I mean? And they're probably not even, and it slows their progress at the bridge because they can't afford to get at the bridge because they've spent it on some stupid e-meter,
And the Mark 8, I mean, maybe they cost $300 to make, and they sell them for 5,000.
Yeah. With this e-meter that you're talking about, do you have to the one you're making? Do you have to uh, get it recalibrated, or is it like this type of electronic stuff where it doesn't need any servicing? It's just perfect.
It doesn't need a trim knob. It doesn't need recalibration. This basically has a voltage stabilizer inside that's not going to change for 50 years, so there's no need for recalibration.
Wow, that's good, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about an update. So you actually built this yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much do you sell these for?
500.
See, that's fantastic, huh? So you're getting a meter it's got an automatic TA. It's much better and it's much cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. And there's in the independent field, there's other people making similar e-meters, is there?
There's a couple of people making meters, and there was Barry Penberthy making the ability meters, but he must be very old now, so I haven't really heard much about that. Though I think the most productive people making meters at the moment are making computerized meters. There's a couple of people in Russia who churn out theta meters, and you don't have the main box, you just have a little thing that puts the display up on your computer screen.
What do you think of that?
I designed and made one myself, called the C meter, before the Russians did it, and I sold maybe 100 of them. And I had a sort of full screen e-meter on the computer or laptop or whatever. Some people really liked it. I myself, after using it for a while and using the mechanical ones, I've gone back to just using the mechanical meter. I find the mechanical movement, it's something I can look at and I feel more certain than looking at a display on a screen with the pixelation and whatever happens. I like the mechanical movement better.
Yeah, yeah, and it comes with cans and cords and all that sort of stuff, and they're good quality, are they?
Yeah. I mean, for auditing myself, I prefer instead of cans, I use these fingertip electrodes. You can see them there. These things go onto the fingers.
Yeah.
And you get a connection that doesn't show any body motion.
Really?
So I move my hand around.
Wow.
If you look at the meter here,
yeah,
and if I'm moving my hand, it's not affecting the reads.
These are sort of the improvements that LIH would be really really happy about. Like these are serious proper improvements, not just like the newest e-meter that the church is releasing is it's just like more clearer reads like that's and it has like a time zone feature like these actually the improvements you're talking about are like they're proper, huh? They're actually useful. Yeah.
I don't think the Mark 8 meter is an improvement over the earlier ones. I don't know what they could have improved except for a few. Well, they say automatic calibration of the start of every session. But wouldn't it be better to have something that didn't need calibrating for 50 years?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look at the advances of the iPhone, that sort of stuff, and the e-meter is just like compared to 1950. It's in the church. It's not a huge advancement, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they've changed a lot of things and made it look fancier, and maybe they count the TA is counted as 3.01 or 3.02, but that's meaningless anyway. It doesn't make any difference whether the TA is 3.75 or 3.76.
I've got a Mark 7, and just looking at this e-meter you've got and comparing the Mark 7 to what you've got, it's just like it just seems like it's provided that it gets the job done and is trustworthy in session, which you're saying it is, right? Then it's just way better. It's way better, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Because it must make. Can people learn all their training on it? Because it must make things a lot easier.
Yeah, well, they don't need as much training. I mean, they don't spend ages fiddling with a TA knob because it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, it's much faster to train.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, it's interesting. I mean, obviously the church is. I know I'm talking a lot negative about the church, but it's just like the more you look into it, the more you just like Jesus. Like, why haven't they got these new features on their e-meter? It's just ridiculous.
Well, they're stuck with, and they have this thing of standard tech, and it puts a noose around their neck. If they want to improve anything as far as e-meters go, they somehow have to justify it by finding something LOH said before he died, hidden away in some little notes or whatever, that justifies changing standard tech.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like an improvement. When LOH has standard tech, he basically means don't just skip grade 1 or don't make grade 1 a new command that says, do you like chickens or something like that. That's squirreling, that's changing the tech. But there's a big difference between, improving the e-meter and squirreling. It's like some people, they can't understand what LRH is talking about. They don't seem to be able to duplicate the whole idea,
Some people are auditing with the auditor holding the cans.
Yeah.
Some people are auditing over the telephone without a meter. Some people are give lectures on the significance of LOH's astrological birth chart in the development of Scientology. People go off down all these weird, strange paths of squirreling. Like one lady started running, she heard a briefing course tape that said you needed to list goals for 1,000 goals to get the right goal. And she created something called Dionysus, where everyone was doing these huge long goals lists, because she never got to the tape on the briefing course where LH said, well, if you're doing long lists, then you're auditing over out rudiments. She just didn't get that far. And so a whole weird squirrel tech was built out of somebody who just hadn't studied the tech.
Yeah. And that's what squirreling is. It's not just, releasing an improvement on e-meter that works and actually helps you in session. That's not squirreling, It's just all about intelligence and using common sense and stuff. And but you did mention earlier that you do some Skype auditing. Now, I mean that will get criticised by people. What do you think of that?
Well, it works. One needs decent equipment like you've got and I've got to make it work, and the auditor needs to have the skills to be able to audit. It's I think it needs a bit more presence, and it's not something that's workable for everyone. You have to really talk to a person, make sure they have to be at a certain case level to be auditable over Skype.
Yeah.
You can't take somebody who needs their objectives and try running, look at that wall, thank you, walk over to that wall. I mean, doing that over Skype just isn't going to work.
Yeah. Speaking of objectives, with the GAT2, they've made the objectives level, they've called it SRD, so it's the survival rundown nowadays, and it's a lot bigger. It's got many more processes, and I've done it, and there's a lot of processes. What's your opinion of that? Do you reckon that's just squirrel or what?
The SRD was actually introduced by LOH in 1980, and around 1980. It wasn't some recent invention, and it did have a lot of processes on it. It took me about 150 hours of auditing and 150 hours on my twin to get through it. when I did it. Some people who are heavier cases were going up to 600 hours each way on co-audit.
Okay.
And what I saw was that the results that people were getting from doing those long hours on objectives were worth the work.
Ah, so that's yeah, that's like funny, because I was actually thinking that. I was thinking that with the GAT2, things have been quickied, but I didn't mind the SRD. I thought the SRD was a good change, except maybe too many processes. But maybe that's because the CS was just not that switched on and was ordering too many. But
no, I don't.
yeah,
There may be more. I think on some cases it was too. There could have been more processes added, because I saw people who would run too lightly on the processes who obviously weren't getting them flat, and they might have needed some extra processes at the beginning to get the C stages to bite properly.
Yeah. That's what it was. It was like GAT1 had the standard sort of objective processes, and this survival rundown had heaps and heaps of undercuts and a lot more smaller, like faster sort of processes. And anyway, but yeah, that's something like, it's not all bad GAT2. Some of it was definitely improvements. And
but GAT, the SRD wasn't GAT. It was something that came from LOH 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
Yeah, they just put it back in again.
Yeah, so it was the it actually dropped out. Oh, it must have dropped out in the early 80s, because I didn't hear very much about it after I left. And I think it was a new flavor of the month came along, or flavor of the day, and it just dropped out.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of the reasons it dropped out was because of the fact that they just don't like people doing long and thorough levels where they can't charge them heaps of money, where they're just co-auditing it. I could just see, because it seemed like in the early 80s when LRH left and the whole squirreling started to happen and people started being quickied up the bridge and stuff, it seems like that would make sense, that this SRD thing would really annoy the execs, because people are co-auditing it for ages and that.
But it was actually the time at Flag when staff auditing was at its highest ever. They have a big course room, 20, 30 sessions going on at once. I was supervising it for a while. I was sort of sitting there with a queue for fixing up PCs. It was a very active time for staff auditing. And now staff auditing, I don't think exists except for sec checks.
Yeah, it died away, huh? Yeah.
That was one of the biggest reasons I saw for Scientology becoming smaller, was they just failed to look after the staff.
Yeah. So I want to do some time traveling with you. I want to wonder, like, how did you first get into Scientology?
It was 1971. I was studying at Bournemouth College, and I just saw a notice up on the walls with the aims of Scientology on it, and I actually thought it was some sort of new political group. But I'd read the name in the newspaper somewhere, and I thought, okay. And I went along, and there was a guy there, a mission holder, and he was running a TRs course. And I sat down and did some TRs, and it was like, boom, okay, this works.
Yeah.
So I got a hold of Scientology 88008, and I read that cover to cover.
Wow, it seems a bit of high gradient.
Yeah, and I just thought, wow, okay, that's it. And so I said, give me the rest of them.
Yeah. And what was your? And so you just started doing Scientology from there, and did you join staff at the mission or something, or what?
No, I was still studying school, college. I was at university, and after a year, I decided to leave and join the Sea Org. So in 1972, I went out to St. Hill, joined the Sea Org, and a couple of months later I was off sailing the ocean with LOH.
Cool. And so did you get to meet LOH and stuff?
Yeah.
Wow. So what sort of person is he like? What sort of personality?
He's impressive. He's a powerful guy. And I could feel if he went for a walk off the ship, when he was coming back, I would feel him coming back when he was maybe 200 or 300 meters away.
Wow.
Boof, okay, he's on the way back. Felt his presence.
Well, if you look at the history of Scientology and his life, you look at it and you're like, wow, this guy was really able to get stuff done, you know? And it's really impressive. It's just like he was really powerful. It was just like this guiding force or something, and it's really interesting, you know?
Oh yeah, he definitely got things done.
Yeah, it's like because a lot of people be like, a lot of people will be jealous. They'll be like, how can he get so much done? How can he just do this? And he just did stuff, you know?
And it was contagious. I mean, when I left the Sea Org, I started computer programming, and I found when I would go and start writing computer programs, I'd be doing the work sometimes 5 or 10 times as fast as the existing people. I walk into my first boss said, "Okay, you finish that now. Just get a science fiction book, read it for 2 weeks. I'm not turning this in for 2 weeks." He said it's going to make us look bad. We got used to a speed of production in the Sea Org that was way above what most people accomplish outside.
Yeah, because you look at LRH's life and you look at all the stuff he did, and you're like, shit, you know, like, wow. I mean, this guy was really talented and really had an ability, because it's just like he got a lot done. He just got cycles done, and it seemed like he did it pretty effortlessly as well.
Yeah, he didn't work with effort. He just decided, boom. He was operating at the level of postulates.
Yeah.
It's like, instead of, okay, I've got to drag my ass up out of the seat and get over there, it was just, boom.
Yeah.
He would move very quickly. Things would happen quickly. There was no effort involved.
Did you get to speak to him personally and get an idea of what sort of personality he was in a casual way?
No. He didn't have casual conversations with most of the crew. There were only a few people there, his aides, people close to him that he talked to. And the way when he was talking with people, he wouldn't talk to people or with them. He would lecture them.
Yeah.
He wasn't a conversationalist.
Yeah.
As a speaker, a lecturer, and people would go in there, they'd sit down, and LOH would start talking, and they wouldn't get more than a sentence or two in. He'd talk for an hour and then send them off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting. You'll be just get an idea of what sort of personality he was, and so you could feel his presence and stuff like that, and he was like a leader. Yeah.
He had quite a few similarities to Donald Trump, I think.
Yeah, Trump seems pretty similar. Like, he's got this sort of this powerful leaderness, because Trump did a pretty big effort in getting elected. Like, he had so much against him, and it's just like you look at it and you're like, Jesus, and he just managed to pull it off. Like, a real big Satan or something, and you know.
Yeah. I'll reserve judgment until we see what he gets done in a few years. But I'm quite hopeful, actually, that he'll make some positive changes.
Yeah, we need it. So, what were things like on the ship back then?
I suppose it was productive. People were mostly cheerful, getting things done, friendly. There was a certain level of snootiness in the upper levels.
What does that mean?
Like
Like they're snobbery, like they thought they were better than other people? which
Oh yeah, so,
Scientology has always had.
yeah. Uh, there was a there were the sort of people that the snobbish layer, but there were also a lot of people who were open, friendly, and um, proper Scientologists. Mhm. I think a lot of them felt, a lot of the people at the top felt that they were incompetent and they were sitting on a sort of mist withhold of incompetence because a lot of the people close to LOH just were not competent.
Mm.
There were only a few that I would say, well, that's somebody who got things done. And there were a lot who just, nah, they weren't up to doing things. Hmm.
Some of the people who criticize LRH, and it's just funny because you speak to someone like you and you say nice stuff about LRH, but then you hear some of these people who hate Scientology and stuff, and they just speak about him in such a bad way. What's the deal with that difference in idea of how people view him?
I think the people, the highest tone level people that I meet who knew LOH say positive things about him. And the people low on the tone scale who knew LOH say bad things about him.
Yeah.
I mean, if one wanders over to a group like the ex-Scientology message board, it's just full of hatred. It's full of people attacking, trying to destroy, and nobody there is producing anything positive. It's all attack, attack, destroy, destroy. And a lot of them, they're just doing it to be part of a social club and feel important.
Yeah.
Some of them have even said it to me. Oh, well, I don't know anything about Scientology, but I just go along to the protests just because it's something to be part of, and I feel like I'm doing something important.
Some of these low-tone people are just ridiculous, but it's interesting how you brought up Donald Trump earlier, because that's what I noticed is really similar in that like people either like him or they hate him, and it's like if you listen to people who hate Trump, they just speak about him as if he's the devil, and the people who love him speak about him as if he's like heaven or whatever. And it's so similar to LRH in that like people are just like strongly divided, and I think it really confuses the average person because they're just like, what the hell is going on? And because the majority seem to be on the anti-LRH side, people start to, people seem to be thinking badly of him, when it's not really true. It's just, nah.
Well, most people who hear something about Scientology don't actually look into it in any detail. They believe what they hear on ABC News or whatever. They just don't have a look at it sufficiently to find out what's going on.
Yeah. They're just superficial. Well, even like let's say look at the homosexuality thing, and LRH said some bad things about them, right? But also in 1950, homosexuality was classified by psychiatry as a mental illness. It was also kind of illegal, and there's these extra things about it that they don't understand. And if you don't have this extra information, you just hear it and you think, oh, he's anti-gay and he's a mean person. But it's just like, no, that's not the case at all. Like you don't know the context and the history and all this sort of stuff.
I mean, I think things have gone. I find this LBGT movement strange.
Yeah,
it's got too far.
Yeah,
too far into accepting weird things.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just add on more things. Okay, let's add on sadomasochism. Let's add on bugger the dog and the cat. Let's, are the animals consenting? They have dog brothels in Germany. Dogs, horses, donkeys.
Really?
Seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot of people get involved in these things, but it just gets stranger and stranger. And then you get the idea of, well, should gay people be allowed to adopt children? It's an experiment. One can't say yes or no. There's not enough evidence in any way to determine whether children are better off or worse off from having two same-sex parents. Personally, I would say it needs to undergo a lot of study before approving it. I don't think it would just, you can't make that sort of change to the way society has been for hundreds of years and expect things to just carry on normally.
Yeah.
Children are going to be different if they have two male or two female parents. Their whole upbringing is going to be within the context of having homosexual parents.
Well, yeah, and speaking of these sort of unusual spiritual things, apparently the male and the female body have like opposite chakras that match up or something, and it's more natural. But people can be whatever they want to be, and you can grant people beingness, and that's fine. And I think that that's what should happen with gays. I think they should be allowed to marry and stuff. But it's just like when it's, you can tell when it's taken too far, and I think it's going too far. It's just like leave little kids alone, let them be whatever they want to be. Don't encourage them to be gay and say, you know, you should be this. And it's weird, you know. Things are going. It's something that's weird that's popular at the moment. That it's just it's going too far, you know.
That's my feeling. Yeah.
What was your post on the Apollo?
Most of the time, I was looking after the radars, the radios, that sort of thing. Electronics technician. Malorich used to send me his e-meters to fix and look after. So I was looking after all the e-meters on the ship. I had the radars, the radios, anything electronic. I looked after it. Photocopiers, the depth finder, a few other things.
And where was the ship during this time?
We went through Morocco, Portugal, Madeira, Las Palmas, Tenerife, Madeira. We sailed over the Atlantic and went to the Bahamas, near in Bermuda. Then we were around the various islands, Curacao, in the Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic. Well, we visited quite a few places.
Can I ask an interesting question? Did you find Atlantis?
Did I find it?
Yeah. Did the Apollo find Atlantis?
No.
No?
I never heard anything about that mentioned on the ship, nor any evidence of it.
All right. Anyway, it'll be interesting if to find Atlantis. But anyway.
There might have been several different Atlantises.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The oceans have changed. I mean, if you look out if you go east of the United Kingdom, there's a whole chunk of land there that had people living on it and got submerged under the sea. And England used to go across to the main continent. And the sea levels have changed, so there might be a dozen different societies, civilizations that have been buried, and it's hard to say which one could call Atlantis.
Yeah. When did you do audit training? Was it on the ship?
I did solo auditor training on the ship. I started solo auditing. I trained as an auditor, first of all, on the RPF at Flag. I was on the RPF for 6 months. And then after I got off the RPF, I did formal training with Class 4, Dianetics, HRD, and all that. And then I was co-audit supervisor and doing review auditing for staff.
Yeah.
So from 78 onwards, formal training.
Yeah. And Flag would have been a pretty fun time there, so you saw it all getting set up and beginning and stuff?
It wasn't really, I would say it wasn't really fun for the people who first arrived there, where I moved over to Flag at Daytona Beach, which was quite a nice place. We took over a motel and delivering there. The Fort Harrison was in serious need of renovation, and it was infested with cockroaches, rats, everything. So the people there, the first couple of months cleaning it up, they had a rougher time of things. And Flag was nice. Um, you actually had proper beds to sleep in when I first went there. Um, but after a few years, it was all switched to bunk beds. So you might have 9 staff in a room, all sleeping in bunk beds, one hotel room.
Is this actually in the Fort Harrison building? So they were
Yeah.
ordered at the bottom levels, and up the top levels people would sleep.
Um, People, a lot of the staff were sleeping in the Fort Harrison when I was there. Um, Different buildings, the purposes switched, and generally the staff were moved into the least desirable accommodation, and the better rooms were sold for use by public or rented out to public.
When did the bedroom switch that you're talking about? When did you notice that? What year did that happen?
It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual. I think I would say 70, late 70s, they started moving in the bunk beds.
And you weren't really getting paid much or anything. It was just sort of a volunteer thing because it was fun and doing what's right in that.
It was about $25 a week then. $24, I think.
Yeah.
But then one didn't have to pay for auditing or training or nothing, so that was $24 on top of food, accommodation, training, auditing, healthcare.
Yeah.
So it was actually probably a lot more than people on minimum wage had to take home with them after paying their basic expenses.
What sort of hours were you working?
Well, I know we've had the horror stories, but I would say I was working on average from 9 to 6 with sort of 45 minutes for lunch. And then I would have evenings for study.
Yeah.
So most of my time in the Sea Org was on that sort of schedule.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour long sometimes, but maybe 8:30 to 6 or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And tell me about when you left and what sort of happened around about that time.
Things were getting heavy. I left when the screaming, the heavy ethics, the working conditions started getting worse. I had a ComEv which it would take too long to go into too much detail about, but at the end of it, I was debarred from advanced courses for eternity. Mainly because I had given advanced course materials to some missionaries who were going to set up an advanced organization in Africa. But apparently I gave them the materials before they'd received final authorization to fire on the mission. I think I was on a hit list basically because hit lists started happening around 1980. And there were various people who were on these lists, and excuses were found to get rid of them, to ComEv them, to put them in ethics, to get them busted.
Why do they want to do that?
It started with the FEBC students. There was an FEB training course at Flag. LOH had the idea that a lot of executives were ripping off the org, running private businesses, using staff for them, making profits. And he thought they were all criminals. And so a huge FEBC program was arranged to bring replacements to Flag for training and send the replacements back. Then they could bust these people and handle their out ethics. but then it also became that certain people got onto hit lists. I think it started soon about the time Bill Franks was declared suppressive.
And what year was that?
This was, I think it was 81. It could have been 82.
Yeah.
I think 81. And I think I made a comment that I thought Bill Franks wasn't suppressive. He was a good guy. And I think that got me on a hit list. And so a lot of people were busted for different things. And I think anyone who was not in agreement with the CMO takeover was busted, and this went on for years and years with Miscavige just busting everyone for anything. He was continually looking for counter-intention to management.
Yeah, it all seems like it just as soon as David Miscavige started to come into the picture and LRH started to leave, that's when things started to go bad. You know what
I don't
mean?
think it was just him. I think a lot of people, I mean, this is a controversial point perhaps, but this isn't true of the early CMO members, you know, the ones I knew on the ship, but a lot of the people who joined the CMO were ex-Nazis.
What do you mean, like what do you mean, like reincarnated Nazis?
I mean, I knew the guy who they had their own auditing unit called the Crackerjack unit, and the CMO all had sort of quite a lot of auditing, most of which was SEC checks. But I knew the guy who ran it, and I knew one of the auditors who was auditing them. And without going into individual case data, both independently said to me that most of the CMO believed that they were ex-Nazis.
Yeah. Okay.
And they acted like it.
And they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was their personality type. I mean, whether they were actually ex-Nazis or not, I don't know. But they certainly seem to have this thing in common that they behave like little Nazis.
And they went around kicking people out and changing things. And what's his face? Miscavige seems like a bit of a Nazi because around at that time he was in the CMO, wasn't he?
Well, if you look at his photo and put it next to that of Joseph Goebbels, they do look quite similar to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he was, but he certainly acts like a Nazi.
People who are part of the church who might be listening to this, see, they'll be judging you the whole way through, going, oh, you know, is he this bad squirrel? Is he this SP or whatever? So they'll be scrutinizing you. But when you're involved with the church, so you had many years of being a good church member, weren't you? And you got kicked out for something that you weren't even in the wrong for. Is that right?
I would say, basically it was an invented crime. I had no choice about handing over the advanced courses materials. I had missionaries with mission orders. They said they need them. I gave them to them. I think that they put me on the ComEv as some way of busting me. And basically when they did that, I just said, well, I'm not having that. See you guys later, and rooted out.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not just you, it's a lot of other people around about this time were getting declared when they shouldn't have been getting declared.
Yeah. Well, there were hundreds, thousands. I think thousands probably were declared at that time, yeah.
Yep. When did you go clear? Was it in the church?
I was I tested clear in 1974.
Oh wow, pretty early on the thing, yeah.
I did the I did the whole clearing course, solo auditors course, power R60W clearing course.
Do the grades and everything?
Yeah, had about 150 hours on the grades,
150
150
hours.
hours on dynamics.
Is that is and you weren't CS by LRH or anything, no?
No,
No. But you were CS though on the ship, Apollo, which means you were at a pretty high standard tech place, right?
I would say so. Yeah.
So would you say that then that's totally fine to do 150 hours on the grades? Then that's actually a good thing.
Um, I think. I mean, I didn't get the best of auditors. I had a student auditor who was quite slow. I would say if I'd had a good auditor, I could have got it done in half the time. And the way things were done then were quite laborious. Um, I felt a lot of things were overrun. The auditor missed DPs. So while the general standard of tech was high, I had student auditors most of the time, and they weren't that effective at getting the auditing delivered at a fast enough rate.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
Cool. Yeah. And so I just with the clearing course and all that, do you think that's the standard route to do that before someone goes clear and everything, or?
No, I think people mostly go clear on Dynetics, objectives, grades, whatever. I mean, I think I had the clear cognition 4 times before doing the clearing course.
Yeah.
When I look back over things, so yeah, if I'd been going through it now, I wouldn't have had to do the R60W clearing course, etc. But I still got lots of gains out of it, so I wasn't unhappy about it.
What was it like to go clear?
Um, if I describe it, I'd be describing the clear cognition. So, and there's a certain point one has with certain realization about certain things, and the nature of one's universe changes dramatically.
Yeah. Sounds good, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
worth doing.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. So what about the OT levels and that? Did you do them on the ship and that sort of stuff in the late 70s and stuff, or on flag, or?
I did OT. I started OT2, OT3. I was on OT3 on the ship, and then I was auditing OT3. For some years, I did about close to 1,000 hours on OT3 at flag. Then I did the old OT4, 5, 6, 7.
Sorry, is OT3 including solo auditing?
OT3 is only solo auditing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like the auditing you've been getting is pretty thorough. Like there's no quicking going on. It sounds like.
Yeah, I did. I spent thousands of hours on these things. I mean, I've spent over 5,000 hours on knots, probably closer to 10,000 now. Uh, I don't add it up anymore.
Yeah. It seems like it's better. The only thing I notice is with is when things bog down. You can sort of tell when they're bogging down. You know what I mean? And then that's bad. But obviously you shouldn't quickie, but you shouldn't bog down as well. Because I noticed it on objectives. I got bogged down on some things, and it was kind of weird. There's a difference between a process that bites hard, and you actually need to run for a long time, and then actually bogging down. Bogging is almost a confusion. You're like, you don't even know what's going on. You just continue doing the same thing, and what do you think of the solo knots taking really, really long amount of time, and sort of, can you explain that in any sort of way?
I think solo knots is really, it's a lot of levels. It's handling a lot of layers of case. I'd say it's at the moment at least 90% of the case gain in Scientology is solo knots.
Really?
I would say it's a very long level that needs to be done thoroughly.
Is it is it
And I
is it
think
is it done just after OT3 or at OT7?
uh, it's it's now done at OT7.
Okay. And is that how you do it in the independent field?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. So it takes a lot of hours, but I guess it's kind of like objective auditing in this SRD. Like it takes a long amount of time, but you get a lot of wins or something, do you?
Yeah, I would say solo knots is, um, yeah, it's most of the case gain in Scientology at the moment. Mm.
And everyone's cases are different, are they? So do you reckon LRH would be faster, or could he even be longer than other people because he's gone through a lot of different stuff?
I mean, I heard that LOH spent 1,500 hours on knots. That was one figure somebody told me. I can't check that. It wasn't something I saw in writing. It was just a figure given to me. Um, so I'd say people, if somebody's spending less than 1,500 hours on knots, then it's too little.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anyone's going to do it faster than LOH.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
And I would expect a normal person to take five times as long as LOH.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's 5 times work.
Just out of curiosity, do you think LRH passed away when the church said he passed away? At the start of 1986?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And some of this stuff that's really out there that people might have heard on the OT level is really strange sort of stuff. What do you say to that, to someone? Is it just... Is there any way you can explain to someone, like...
Well, I would have to talk to the individual person. There's no way I could make an open statement about how to talk to them. I would have to talk to that person, find their reality level, and communicate to that one person.
Because people have problems even believing the prenatal thing. Some people can, especially people below tone 2, can get affected by just hearing the prenatal thing, and then they might hear something that's just really, it's too much for them to understand and comprehend or something, and they're almost better off not have hearing it, not have heard it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So we're just talking about the OT levels, and I want to say something about that. Because recently, actually, I read something on the OT levels, and I read it, and I was kind of like, oh, now I get why LRH doesn't want you to read the OT levels. Because after I read it, it was too much for me to handle. I didn't have enough information to understand it properly, and it kind of made me feel like I really questioned LRH. You know what I mean? I really questioned, like, was this guy, a nutter or not, basically. And then I had to call up someone who I knew had read a similar thing, and I had to talk with him about it and get some more background data. And I ended up sorting it out, and I was okay with it. I'm still not totally. I just need more data, but I was handled a lot on it. But I was kind of like, I understood that phenomenon of, like, sometimes you can hit information that's just, you don't have enough data to understand it.
Yeah.
And you can get thrown off by it. And it's quite interesting. So some people who might have heard negative stuff about Scientology and stuff that's out there, and a lot of these Scientology haters and stuff, and people that put stuff on the internet might talk about some stuff that goes on in these OT levels, and people are listening who don't know much about Scientology, if they might be thrown off by it. But the thing is, I think it's just, you need more data. You need more information to explain it. Like, well, let's just use the prenatal thing for an example. It's like you might sound like it's out there, or the past life thing. It might seem like it's out there, but for people who actually have information about these sort of things, and people who are a lot of funky spiritual people, and to them it's not, and it's because they've got more data. So don't just dismiss things as being, out there, and being bullshit, because it's just like you need a lot of background information. What do you think?
Yeah, and some of it is awareness level. There are a lot of people who just are going to take a lot of work to reach the point where they realize they're not just a piece of meat, and they are a spiritual being. And the data is going to be much harder for them to accept. So they probably need a lot of auditing before they reach the point of being ready to understand the OT level data.
Yeah, and I agree, like, that people should stay away from it. Only if somebody's really, really well read and really aware would I say, you should be all right to read it. This is just what I think. It might be wrong, but
well, if you read History of Man, I mean, you're reading History of Man.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
That has a lot of data from the OT levels on it.
Exactly. That's exactly. I'm going to say that now. If anyone wants to just know what's in the OT levels, just go and read History of Man. That covers so much. That book.
That's enough.
That's all you need.
That's
That's really, really all you need. And some of these people, like, you get some, like, I don't know, some 21-year-old from the suburbs or something. If they just hit some of this sort of information in Scientology, like, it can really put them off it. So, and some people who are lower on the bridge, so it's just like, certain people I think can sort of handle it, but other people, yeah, definitely no. It can ruin Scientology for you. So you just stay away from it. And yeah, all the information's in the History of Man. Because I read that recently.
Our society is the level general. Sorry, I've got an update thing coming up here. Okay, it's gone. The general education level of the society has gone down.
Oh yeah, so bad.
I mean, now kids learn from videos. They can't read.
They can't. Yeah, they actually can't. Yeah.
People can't read instruction books.
Yeah.
They have to go on the net and watch a video of someone explaining, how to put a new bag in their vacuum cleaner, or, how to boil an egg, how to, there are videos on that, how to chop up carrots. All these things have videos explaining them.
Well, this is part of the whole dwindling spiral thing, because it's like I know, because I'm part of the generation, and I experienced the transformation of actually learning how to speak and read English, right? And that's why hitting LRH's data and the information about word clearing was so revolutionary for me, because it was like, whoa, because my grandparents' generation, right? They could actually read and sort of duplicate things more, and they could read LRH's books and understand. But if you take an 18-year-old kid now and give him a Dianetics book, he's just going to struggle to read it. He's going to absolutely struggle, and it's just like, and the school systems are just, I mean, I don't want to get all negative, but it's just like they literally don't teach kids how to read. They actually don't, and all you can do is have a conversation with them, but they can't actually study formal stuff like at university or Scientology materials. They actually can't read them and duplicate them, because they're full of MUs. They're not told what words mean. They don't learn it.
What I noticed, a lot of people seem to learn the language not by understanding the words anymore. They talk in phrases. Like somebody'd say, "Oh, I know what you mean," but they don't know what the words "I know what you mean" each mean. They just know the phrase. I've got to go to work. They might not know all the words in the phrase or the sentence, but somebody said, "I've got to go to work." They got the idea of what it means, and they don't understand the words in it. They just know that's the phrase, that's the sentence to say, when you're going to work. And there's a lot of people in the society at that level of just not understanding the words, and they have a vocabulary of phrases.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, and it's not just words like go or even I. Yeah, they're not even really aware of what words like I or me and these. There's just the schools aren't teaching people how to read. They literally aren't, and that's why some kids can go to university and they'll open up this thing with all these fancy, ridiculous words that's written in like a complex sentence way, and they struggle with it and they end up just not really enjoying university and leaving and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, that's the big thing, huh? Terrible thing.
And just the whole idea of it's put forward that different people have different ways of learning, and lots of people learn by video better than by reading. And I would say that while it's easier to teach people with videos if you don't have to teach them how to read and write, but reading and writing are necessary skills, and everyone should be able to learn that way in order to make it in the world. Or flip burgers.
And yeah, the kids are just, the way the school systems are, that they're just wasting all this time not even learning the basics. And that's why it's like, it's kind of difficult for people who are trying to promote Scientology in that, because we've got these materials that are written in the 50s when people could actually understand words and duplicate written materials, and you hand it to some 18-year-old kid and it's like, good luck having them trying to understand what the hell's going on with this. You know, like it all starts with the MU thing, you know? More than anything, that seems to be the most important thing.
But then the other thing is, if one accepts the idea of reincarnation, then one has a lot of the children being born just have no experience for a long time. They've never had bodies on this planet before, or at least not recently. We're dealing with much more inexperienced theta beings.
Interesting, yeah. So they're not used to the English language and that, so that they're going to be having more problems with it. Yeah. All right, so we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and so basically you left the church in the early 80s, right?
Yeah, 82.
And a lot of people left at that time. And so since then, have you been doing privately auditing people? Is that basically what you've been doing as a job, or what?
Well, I left in 82. I got a job working with British Telecom for a couple of years, computer programming. Then I started some freelance work, programming. But at the same time, I was auditing people. I started auditing people in the evenings, helping people with courses. So it was quite a few years before I actually started doing auditing all the time and gave up the full-time employment. It was maybe 10 years or so.
So other independent people contacted you and were happy to get audited by you back in those days?
Yeah, starting in 1980, what was it, 84, yeah.
There were other people who had left and they didn't want to be involved with the church in that?
A lot of people left in 82 and 83.
Yeah.
Thousands.
Yep.
It doesn't appear in the history books written by the church, but there were thousands.
Yeah.
And quite highly trained as well.
Yeah, and how's the independent field going these days, do you think?
It's sort of muddling along. It's not really expanding at a huge rate. I don't see growth, except maybe, I think in Taiwan they have.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, Did you hear 100 staff? I heard 100 staff.
I heard that number. I haven't seen it personally, but that sounds wow. And I think Russia.
Because I know that the church was busy. Like, I actually know, because I spoke to because there's a lot of Taiwan people in Melbourne when I was involved with the church, and so that the Taiwan churches and that were actually busy, like what were things were like back in the 70s, and so I imagine that they probably do have an independent mission or something, independent org that's got 100 staff or something. The Taiwanese people love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be there next lifetime.
Yeah. I think I think I will as well. It sounds like a pretty good country anyway. Outside of that, like things are, except real estate's real expensive apparently. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a while to go, I think, this lifetime, so
Yeah.
maybe I'll look at it in 20 years and see. Make up my mind.
Yeah, and what do you think of these above, like the OT8 and above that and that sort of stuff, and how to get your hands on them? What do you think of those levels?
I think OT8. I mean, there's been so many different versions of OT8. I don't really think there are more than a handful of people ready to do them.
Okay.
I think people mostly need to do a lot more auditing on solar knots. I mean, all these people who are releasing OT levels up to OT42, I just think it's delusory. It's not OT levels. It's something else.
Did LRH even get up to OT8?
Yeah. I can only go on what David Mayo has said, that LRH was solo auditing on a few levels above OT8. He did talk in various places about research on levels up to OT22. But it can be a matter of how one numbers things. One could take 8 levels and package them all as one OT level, or one could number them OT 8 to 16.
Yeah.
I think really we have to get a lot more people finished through solo knots, doing OT8, and then look more into OT9 and do the ideas that some of us have about how they will run work for most people.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own ideas about OT9, which I've changed a lot over the years. Now I have a particular idea of what's involved in it, but there's very few people I could talk to about how to run it.
Yeah.
Because I have so little experience doing it with other people.
Yeah. And you're talking about you get how there's you handle a lot of charge on solo knots or something. Well, let's say with ejectives, right? So you can do a process and you're less keyed in, right? And you can be smarter or more aware. What sort of wins do you get from solo knots?
I suppose one gets lighter. The heaviness of the body disappears. One's space expands. One feels much bigger. One's intention increases. And then sort of what one call OT abilities start popping up. I mean, sometimes I can see other people's cases and just boom, forward it without talking to them about it, and just boom, all right, I decide to handle this, and it handles. It's not something I generally do. It's something I would consider using in an emergency. If a person's extremely ill or they have some heavy condition, then I can audit it directly. And it works with some people sometimes.
If you were past someone walking on the street or something, could you suddenly as is something on their case and key them out?
Yeah. I won't say I can do it with everyone. I can say I can do it with some of the people some of the time.
Do you do it to just amuse yourself and because it's good to do? And
just something to do. Something. Yeah, it's a useful thing to do. It's not something I do a lot because it's basically overriding their self-determinism.
Oh, okay,
so
yeah.
If somebody gets their case pulled apart on an other determined basis, they're not going to really get long-term benefits from it.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah, I do see how it would be a good thing to get everyone up to OT7 and then just be keying everyone out. Just key
Mm.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain processes I can give to people who've done OT8 and are ready for OT9 that, yeah, they can keep people out around them and walk into a room and the room gets brighter. The people get brighter.
Yeah.
Mm.
And between, because apparently LRH contacted David Mayo in '82 or something, and sort of told him to leave the church or whatever. What do you
No,
think? What do you think of that?
I've never heard that from anyone.
I heard that David Mayo said that LRH said he's losing control of the church, and you might have to start something up outside of the church.
I didn't hear that from David Mayo or anyone else.
Wow, yeah, no, I've heard David Mayo say that, like in one of his lectures or something, or some interview. He said that.
I'd have to listen to it. I don't recall. I mean, there's a lot of David Mayo's tapes I didn't listen to, so it's possible he said it at some point.
Yeah. So what do you like David Mayo and his tech and what he did and yeah, what do you think of that?
Um, I like David Mayo. He was CSing me for a lot of the time when I was on OT3. Um, After he left the church, he was doing good things. He was delivering the tech. Um, he was a very, he was a good person. He had integrity. He didn't like the heaviness that was going on in the church. Now I think David Mayo's drifted away from the tech. He's not really doing, he's not active, and hasn't been for quite some time. So I think basically he was, he couldn't really handle the independent scene. He was just had too many attacks on him. And, there were too many suppressive assholes trying to do him in. And he just didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore.
Yeah. And between 83, when things started really going bad, like in 82 and stuff, what do you think LRH was doing at that actual time? Do you just think he was writing a lot of Mission Earth?
LOH was hiding. He had a lot of problems with the IRS taxes. He was in constant fear of being found and arrested. So, yeah, he was involved with Scientology, but he wasn't very much involved with the day-to-day management.
Yeah. And do you think he was being productive, or do you think he was on his deathbed sort of struggling to survive or something, like, you know?
I think he was active until not long before he died.
So do you think, you don't think it was a gradual deterioration of his health? It was more of a sort of sudden sort of...
I don't really have enough data to say. I can speculate, but I wasn't there and I'd already left quite a while before, so I'd just be speculating, really.
Well, I've listened to Mission Earth, and if the last book on Mission Earth is one of the last things he completed, that person, whoever wrote that, you know, which is most likely him, because it's so intelligent, and it doesn't seem like it shows the signs of someone whose intelligence is deteriorating, or they're getting whatever it is old people get, where their memory goes or they get worse. It didn't show any signs of that. It showed signs of someone who was still switched on, still intelligent, and yeah, you know.
That's my feeling. I think he was active and in command of his senses until close to the end. But that's my speculation. I don't have evidence.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, if anyone wants to get audited by you or wants to read some of the interesting information you've got on your website, what can they look up? What's it called?
They could just look up my name on Facebook. It's probably the easiest. I've got www.ralphhilton.eu website there. But the easiest way is just to look me up on Facebook and say hi.
Yep, and you can help. Can you get someone from like objectives all the way up to the OT levels and stuff?
Yeah, objectives, they'd have to either find someone locally or come here. Um, so TRs, objectives, um, we'd have to work something out on, but yeah, I can work with people um, all the levels of the bridge.
And people can go there to buy this e-meter as well.
Yep.
Wow, the e-meter is really impressive, I reckon. Like those extra abilities, it's just like it saves so much time fiddling around with knobs and yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Ralph, and
Okay.
yeah, I'll speak to you sometime in the future.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks
See ya.
for doing this. Okay.
All right, so that was the interview with Ralph Hilton, and if you want to watch it, because you can watch it, it's on my YouTube channel, and you can see at the start for a few seconds, you can see he holds to the screen the e-meter that he builds. But yeah, just go to his website; it's probably got photos of it there, and the e-meter does sound like a pretty good deal. No servicing and that sort of stuff, and the automatic tone arm, like wow, all about making it easy to go up the bridge. Okay, that is it for today's podcast. It's time for you to climb back out of this rabbit hole, out of this world of Scientology. If you like this adventure, make sure you subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or on my YouTube channel, Andy Nolch. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself, get up that bridge. Goodbye.